Hey, what's up? Well, Monday's here again. Unlike most people, Monday is my favorite day of the week because it's like finally we get back to my dad going to work. And when he retires, I don't know what I'll do. Um, you know, it's like I enjoy the weekend, but of course I can't make videos other than the kind like I've just uploaded of my cute little baby. I've just always wanted to do a color reveal baby. And the bigger dolls cost even more, and I just didn't want to spend the amount that you would pay for a bigger doll, not knowing what they will end up looking like. And although I would love to have the full collection of all four, I think I'll just be satisfied with the one I have because I could buy more of them and they turn out to be the exact same one. So anyway, it is just a lovely, lovely day. It's 54 right now for the first time since the spring, and I just love fall weather. Fall is just a wonderful time of year, which is why I bought this beautiful orange ring. I love Halloween, I love the fall, and I love being able to finally wear my 3/4 and long sleeve shirts again instead of short sleeves. So I'm loving the weather. And I'd like to start out by talking about what a difference a year makes. Last year at this time is when I started to take an interest in Mars because every night it would rise in the east like a full moon around sunset and then set around sunrise, meaning it was in opposition to the night side of the Earth. And if only I'd had my telescope last October, I could have seen it at its peak opposition. The best visibility is when it's right smack dab in the middle of the night side of the Earth. Well, this year is a Venus year instead. And I tried to look at Venus. And of course, I looked at Mars in January while it was still highly visible. But unfortunately, neither one of them are very clear on my telescope because it's not really all that powerful. And that's okay because I really only wanted it to look at the moon. And I was unable to see any of the planets clearly. Jupiter is the one that I see the best. It looks like a plain white ball with no lines or anything, and it's orbited by tiny little moons. That's how you know which planet you're looking at. And I've seen Saturn where you can barely make out the rings. It's just totally white. And a few others. They're just not very detailed on my telescope, but that's okay. Like I said, I don't need a $1,000 telescope. I can just look it up on the internet and see what the planets look like. I am so glad I was born at a time, where you can actually look at that information so quickly and easily, including Pluto, which they used to not know exactly what it looked like. But anyway, I feel like I was born in the perfect time period. I'm so glad I was born in the 80s because I got to experience a little bit of the old school world, in the 20th century, but I'm also able to enjoy the modern conveniences of today. But I'm sure everyone feels that way. So, what I'd like to talk about today, really a number of things. I'd like to talk about I'd like to start off, I really wanted to make a video and title it, Why Kids Wet the Bed. Okay, and I really don't want to spend that much time talking about this because, it's kind of a sensitive subject and it's not a really pleasant one. And I never had issues with bedwetting as a child. And there is a misconception, about bedwetting and why kids wet the bed. And it ties into my Rugrats obsession. And, a lot of people have stupid ideas about why, children wet the bed. And really, there's only one of two reasons. It all boils down to one of two things in otherwise normal, healthy children. And those two reasons, why kids wet the bed, let's say past the age of 4, And for girls, I would say age 3, because I was completely dry 24/7 by the age of 2.5. And I was completely out of diapers and never had any regressions. So if children are still wetting the bed into their school years, there's only one of two things going on most of the time. I mean, there are others, but those are extremely rare. Okay, usually it's because they're constipated and they have this mass in their colon and it's taking up space in their pelvic cavity that the bladder needs. So the bladder can't fill up to maximum capacity because they have a mass in their colon from being constipated, and they would need an x-ray to find that out. Or they are doing it intentionally, like it's not a true accident. They're doing it on purpose because they're jealous of a younger sibling, or they have some psychological reason why they're doing it on purpose. Okay, usually it's jealousy of a younger sibling that's getting more attention. And that usually resolves pretty quickly, as they get higher into their school years, because, I mean, really, you can only be so old and it still be somewhat socially acceptable. Okay? So most of the time, children who wet the bed usually have constipation. And sometimes they also have encopresis, which I've talked about before. When they poop their pants because they're so constipated that they no longer feel the urge and the loose stool leaks around the constipated mass. Okay, so enuresis and encopresis go hand in hand. And so most kids who wet the bed, I've never known a bedwetter to not also have occasional pooping accidents. My sister is the main one that comes to mind because she was the one who had bedwetting issues on and off. And she also pooped in her panties more times than I can even think to remember. But it was pretty mysterious how a lot of times she would go through, like it would come and go. These problems would sort of come and go. She would go into remission, especially during the summer. And then sometimes, it would start up again as she got back into school. She would be bedwetting, like especially age 5. That was the worst year for bedwetting, and the worst year for soiling was age 8. When she was 5, it's like she would wet the bed. She would go through times where she wouldn't wet it for a long time, and then she would go through times when she would wet the bed almost every night, to the point where she had to wear diapers at night at age 5. And she would have this issue for a while, but then somehow she would get diarrhea for whatever reason. She'd get on antibiotics or she'd get a stomach virus, and she'd get diarrhea, and she would poop in her pants, which she would try to deny this, but she literally pooped in a diaper at age 5. And I was totally shocked and horrified. But she would get diarrhea, and then miraculously she'd be cured of the bedwetting for a while, until it would eventually start up again. And so the diarrhea would somehow cure the bedwetting. Well, what was really happening, I think, is she was being cleaned out. Like her body would get cleaned out by having diarrhea for whatever reason, or loose stools. And I think, my mom didn't understand this because no doctor ever explained that. They just lied and said, oh, well, it's normal. There's a multi-billion-dollar diaper industry that depends on doctors telling people that it's normal for kids to wet the bed until they're 8. But the reality is that I think, the constipation that was the underlying cause of both problems was being cleared out by the diarrhea. And she would temporarily go into remission with the bedwetting after that. And the pants pooping, she would kind of do that on and off, like it kind of tapered off gradually when she was, say, 8 to 18, you know, but it was totally bizarre to me that she still had occasional pooping accidents, well into her teens, if not her adult life, for all I know. And that had never happened with me. What I really think is that a lot of times kids wet the bed and soil themselves because they're holding their poop. So if they're not doing it on purpose, if it's not a toilet training regression, usually between the ages of 3 and 5, not much older. So if there's not a younger sibling to cause jealousy, it's usually constipation or encaprices that leads to bedwetting. And so I think that's what was going on with my sister. She was withholding her poop for whatever reason, some stupid reason. She would try to put off having bowel movements until she absolutely couldn't wait any longer. And that's why she would poop in her panties a lot of times. She would hold it until she absolutely couldn't. And usually that's a boy problem. But I think that's what was going on with my sister, is that it also led to bladder issues, and she would have daytime wetting accidents. So what really makes me mad is these Rugrat defenders that will try to say that never in a million years would Angelica ever poop in her pants. But yet she wet her bed in the potty episode. And so, people who like to see that as a one-time or a one-off accident, she just wet the bed one time and she never did it again. Well, how do you really know? I mean, did you actually feel her, in every episode? I mean, I know she's not a real person, okay? The other thing is she doesn't even look wet in the bedwetting episode. Like, where's the puddle on her clothes? So really and truly, I've never taken that at face value, for one thing. I mean, just because she says it was an accident, I mean, isn't she a compulsive liar? I mean, doesn't she lie about everything else? Like, if she'll lie about a broken leg, who's to say she wasn't lying? Who's to say she didn't do it on purpose because she was jealous of the younger babies? So, there's one of two things in my mind going on with Angelica on Rugrats. Either, number one, she's jealous of the babies, which is the most obvious explanation. I mean, she's 3 years old. She's not far from being a baby. And she behaves that way in every episode. The mean behavior would be explained by that. So she's either doing it on purpose, and she lied about having an accident because she's actually jealous of the babies and she wants to wear diapers, which I'm not convinced she ever got out of them. So she, that's a good explanation. And, or, she's basically the cartoon equivalent of a child that holds in their poop. Maybe she thinks it isn't right for a princess to ever have to poop, which is stupid. She holds herself to the point where she actually doesn't feel the urge to do either one. Hence the accidents. A potty-trained child does not have accidents, no matter what anybody says. And bedwetting is rarely a one-time thing. They're not cold, they're not dreaming, they're on the toilet, they didn't drink too much. No, they wet the bed because they're either doing it on purpose and or they have a mass in their colon that makes it to where their bladder can only fill up so much. And so yeah, I mean, it's just so stupid. I mean, I can't even believe I'm still talking about this, this cartoon character and her bodily functions. But I'm not convinced that Angelica was ever potty trained or that she would never crap in her pants. So I will never be seen wearing anything with the Rugrats, and I don't care about the reboot.